This is a reading from the poem of the Man God by Maria Valtorta, Volume 3, Episode 275, Avarice and the Foolish Rich Man, 10th and 14th of September, 1945. Jesus is on one of the hills on the western coast of the lake. The towns and villages spread on both shores are displayed under his eyes. Directly under the hill are Magdala and Tiberias, the former with its luxurious district strewn with gardens, clearly separated from the poor houses of fishermen, peasants, and common people by a little torrent now completely dry. The latter, magnificent in every quarter, a town unaware of misery and decay, looking beautiful and fresh in the sunshine before the lake. Between the two towns there are few but well-kept vegetable gardens on the short plain, while olive trees climb the hill conquering it. From this hilltop one can see behind Jesus the saddles of the Mount of Beatitudes, at the foot of which there is the main road which goes from the Mediterranean Sea to Tiberias. Perhaps Jesus has chosen this place because it is so close to a very busy road, and thus people can come here from many towns, both on the lake and in the inland of Galilee, and then go back home in the evening or find hospitality in many of the towns. The climate is also mild because of the height, and also because the tall trees on the upper slopes have replaced the olive trees. There are in fact many people beside the apostles and disciples, people who need Jesus for health reasons or for advice, people who have come out of curiosity or led by friends or in a spirit of imitation. In brief, there is a large crowd. The season, which is no longer hot but tends to the languid pleasantness of autumn, encourages pilgrims to come in search of the Master. Jesus has cured sick people and has spoken to the crowd on the subject of wealth unjustly attained, and detachment therefrom, as is necessary in everyone who wishes to gain heaven, and is essential in those who want to be his disciples. He is now replying to the questions of this or that rich disciple who is somewhat upset by such requirement. John the scribe says, "Must I destroy what I have, thus depriving my family of what is due to them?" No, God gave you some property. Let it be useful to justice, and make just use of it. That is, assist your family by means of it, which is your duty. Treat your servants humanely, and that is charity. Help the poor, and the poor disciples in need. Your wealth thus will not be a hindrance, but an aid. Then, addressing the crowds, he says, "I solemnly tell you that also the poorest disciple can be in the same danger of losing heaven through attachment to riches, if he acts against justice by coming to terms with rich people after he has become a priest of mine. A rich or wicked man will often endeavor to seduce you with gifts to make you agreeable to his way of living and to his sin. And among my ministers there will be some who will yield to the temptation of presents. That must not happen. Follow the Baptist's example. Although he was not a judge or a magistrate, he possessed the perfection of judge and magistrate, as pointed out in Deuteronomy. You must be impartial. You must take no bribes, for a bribe blinds wise men's eyes and jeopardizes the cause of the just. Too often man allows the edge of the sword of justice to be blunted by the gold which a sinner rubs on it. No, that must not happen. Learn how to be poor, how to die, but never come to terms with sin, not even with the excuse of using that gold for the poor. It is cursed gold, and would bear no good. It is the gold of a disgraceful compromise. You have been appointed masters, that you may be masters, doctors, and redeemers. What would you be if your own interest led you to agree to wickedness? Masters of evil science, doctors who kill their patients, not redeemers, but parties to the ruin of hearts. One of the crowd comes forward and says, "I am not a disciple, but I do admire you. Answer this question of mine. Is it lawful to keep the money of another person? No, man, it is larceny, like robbing the purse of a passerby. Even if it is family money? Of course, it is not right that one should take possession of the money belonging to all the others. Then come to Abelmaim, master, on the road to Damascus, and order my brother to share with me the inheritance of our father, who died without leaving a written will. He took everything for himself. And remember that we are twins, born at the first and only birth. So I have the same rights as he has." Jesus looks at him and says, It is a painful situation, and your brother is certainly not behaving righteously. But all I can do is to pray for you and for him, that he may change, and I can come to your village and evangelize, and thus touch his heart. The road is no burden to me if I can bring about peace between you." The man becomes furious and bursts out, "What's the use of your words? It takes much more than that in this case. Did you not tell me to order your brother to order is not to evangelize. An order is always joined to a threat. Threaten to strike his person if he does not give me what is due to me. You can do that. As you give health, you can give disease. Man, I came to convert, not to strike. But if you have faith in my words, you will have peace. Which words? I told you that I will pray for you and for your brother, that you may be comforted, and he may be converted." "Nonsense! I am not such a fool as to believe that. Come into order." Jesus, who has been meek and patient, becomes impressive and severe. He straightens up. Before, he was bending over the little stout, angry man, and he says, "Man, who appointed me judge or arbitrator between you? Nobody. But to avoid a rupture between two brothers, I was willing to come and practice my mission of conciliator and redeemer. And if you had believed my words, on going back to Abelmaim, you would have found your brother already changed. But you will not believe, and you will have no miracle. If you had been able to get hold of the treasure before your brother, you would have kept it, depriving your brother of it. Because as it is true that you were born twins, it is also true that you have twin passions, and both you and your brother have but one love, gold, and one faith, gold. Be therefore with your faith. Goodbye." The man goes away, cursing Jesus, while all the people present are scandalized and would like to punish him. But Jesus objects, saying, "Let him go. Why dirty your hands striking a brute? I forgive him because he is possessed and led astray by the demon of gold. Forgive him as well. Let us rather pray for the unhappy man so that he may become humane again, with a beautiful, free soul." That is true. Even his countenance was dreadful because of his greed. Did you notice it? The disciples and those who were close to the miser asked one another, "It is true indeed. He did not look the same person as before." Yes, and when he rejected the master, he almost struck while cursing him, and his countenance was demoniac. A tempting demon. He wanted to lead the master to wickedness. "Listen," says Jesus, It is true that the alterations of the Spirit are reflected on one's face. It is as if the demon appeared on the surface of his possession. Only few people who are demons, either in deeds or appearance, do not disclose what they are, and those few are perfect in evil and perfectly possessed. The countenance of a just man, instead, is always beautiful, even if his face is materially disfigured, because of a supernatural beauty which from the interior exudes exteriorly. And it is not just a saying, but a real fact, that we notice a bodily freshness as well in those who are free from vices. The soul within us envelops our whole being. The stench of a corrupt soul affects also the body, whereas the scent of a pure soul preserves it. A corrupt soul drives the flesh to obscene sins, which age and disfigure the body. A pure soul incites the body to a pure life, which grants a fresh complexion and imparts majesty. Endeavor to keep your youth spiritually pure, or to revive it, if you have already lost it, and beware of greed, both for sensual pleasures and for power. The life of man does not depend on the abundance of his wealth, neither in present life, and much less in the next one, eternal life. It depends instead on his way of living, as well as his happiness, both on the earth and in heaven, because a vicious man is never really happy. On the contrary, a virtuous man is always happy with a celestial joy, even if he is poor and alone. Not even death upsets him, because he has no sins or remorse making him fear to meet God. Neither does he regret what he leaves on the earth. He knows that his treasure is in heaven, and like a man who goes to take the inheritance due to him, a holy inheritance, he goes happily and solicitously towards death, which opens to him the gate of the kingdom, where is his treasure. Store up your treasure at once. Begin in your youth. You young people, work incessantly. You older people who are closer to death because of your age. But since the date of death is unknown, and the child often dies before a venerable old man, do not postpone the work of storing up treasure of virtues and good deeds for the next life, lest death should reach you before you have placed the treasure of merits in heaven. Many people say, "Oh, I am young and strong. I will enjoy myself for the time being on the earth, and I will turn later." A big mistake. Listen to this parable. A rich man's estate had yielded a good harvest, a really miraculous harvest. He looks happily at so much abundance piling up in his fields and threshing floors, and which is to be stored in provisional sheds, and even in the rooms of his house, since his barns cannot hold it all, and says, "I have worked like a slave, but I have not been disappointed by my fields. I have worked as much as for 10 harvests, and I am going to rest just as long. What shall I do to put away all this crop? I do not want to sell it, otherwise I should be compelled to work to have a new crop next year. This is what I will do. I will knock down my granaries and build larger ones, capable of holding all my crops and my goods. And then I will say to my soul, 'O my soul, you have aside good for many years. Rest therefore, eat, drink, and have a good time.'" The man, like many more people, mistook his soul for his body, and mixed the sacred and the profane, because in actual fact a soul does not rejoice in revelries and idleness, but languishes. And the man, like many, after the first good harvest in the fields of virtue, stopped, as he thought he had done everything. But do you not know that once you have laid your hands on the plough, you must persevere for 1, 10, 100 years, as long as your life lasts, because to stop is a crime against oneself, as one denies oneself a greater glory, and it is a regression, because generally he who stops not only does not proceed further, but turns back. The treasure of heaven must increase year by year to be good, because if mercy is benign to those also who had few years to store it up, it will not be an accomplice of lazy people who in a long life do little. It is a treasure, increasing continuously. Otherwise, it is no longer a fruit-bearing treasure, but an unfruitful one, which is detrimental to the readily available peace of heaven. God said to the foolish man, "Fool, you mistake body and wealth of the earth for what is spirit, and you turn the grace of God into evil. This very night the demand will be made for your soul, and it will be taken away, and your body will lie lifeless. And this hoard of yours, whose will it be then? Will you take it with you? No, you will come to my presence, despoiled of earthly crops and spiritual works, and you will be poor in the next life. It would have been better if you had used your crops for works of mercy on behalf of your neighbor and yourself, because if you had been merciful towards others, you would have been merciful to your own soul, and instead of fostering idle thoughts, you could have plied a trade which would have given an honest profit for your body and great merit for your soul until I called you. And the man died that night and was severely judged. I tell you solemnly that happens to those who store up treasures for themselves, but do not grow rich in the eyes of God. Go now, and avail yourselves of the doctrine explained to you. Peace be with you." And Jesus blesses and withdraws into a thicket with his apostles and disciples to take some food and rest. And while eating, he continues to speak on the same lesson, repeating a subject already explained several times to the apostles, and which I think will never be clarified enough, because man is too easily seized with foolish fears. "You must believe," he says, "that man should worry only about making himself rich in virtue. But mind you, you must not worry anxiously or painfully. God is the enemy of anxiety, of fears, of haste, which still show too many traces of avarice, jealousy, and human mistrust. Let your work be constant, confident, peaceful, without rough starts and stops, as onagers do. But one makes use of them unless one is mad. But no one makes use of them unless one is mad to go on a safe journey. Be peaceful in victory and peaceful in defeat. Also tears shed for an error you made, and which grieves you because by it you have displeased God, must be peaceful, comforted by humility and trust. Prostration, anger against oneself, are always a symptom of pride and lack of confidence. He who is humble knows that he is a poor man, subject to the miseries of the flesh, which at times triumphs. He who is humble puts his trust not so much in himself as in God, and is serene also when defeated, and says, "Forgive me, Father. I know that you are aware of my weakness, which overwhelms me at times. I will believe that you pity me. I am fully confident that you will help me in future, even more than heretofore, notwithstanding I please you so little. Do not be indifferent or avaricious with regards to the gifts of God. Give generously what you possess of wisdom and virtue. Be active in spiritual matters as men are with regard to their bodies. As far as your bodies are concerned, do not imitate the people of the world who always tremble for their future, fearing they may lack what is superfluous, that they may be taken ill or die, that enemies may be harmful, and so on. God knows what you are in need of. Therefore be not afraid for your future. Be free from tears, which are heavier than the chains of galley slaves. Do not be anxious about the necessities of life, what you will eat or drink, and how you will clothe yourself. The life of the Spirit is worth more than the life of the body, and the body is worth more than clothes, because you live with your bodies, and not with your clothes. And through the mortification of your bodies, you help your souls to attain eternal life. God knows how long He will leave your souls in your bodies, and He will give you what is necessary until that hour. He gives it to crows, impure birds which feed on corpses, and the reason for their being is just to remove putrefying corpses. And will He not give you what is necessary? Crows have neither larders nor granaries, and God feeds them just the same. You are men, not crows. At present you are the cream of men, because you are the disciples of the Master, the evangelizers of the world, the servants of God. And can you possibly think that God may neglect you, even for what concerns your clothes, since He takes care of lilies of the valley, and makes them grow, and clothes them with such beautiful robes that Solomon never possessed the like? And yet they do not work, but sent, worshipping God. It is true that by yourselves you cannot add one tooth to a toothless mouth, or lengthen by 1 inch a contracted leg, or make dimmed eyes bright. And if you cannot do such things, can you think you may be able to repel misery and disease, and turn dust into food? You cannot. But do not be of little faith. You will always have what you need. Do not worry like the people of the world who strive to satisfy their pleasures. You have your Father who knows what you need. All you must seek, and it must be your first care, is the kingdom of God and His justice, and all the rest will be given to you as well. Be not afraid, my little flock. My Father was pleased to call you to the kingdom, that you may have His kingdom. You may therefore aspire to it, and assist the Father through your goodwill and holy activity. Sell your property and give the money to charity if you are alone. Give your relatives means of subsistence as compensation for your abandoning the house to follow me, because it is unfair to deprive children and wife of their daily bread. And if you cannot sacrifice money, sacrifice the wealth of your affections. They are money which God evaluates for what they are, gold which is purer than any other gold, pearls which are more precious than those taken from the sea, and rubies which are rarer than those found in the bowels of the earth. Because to renounce one's family for my sake is love, which is more perfect than the purest gold. It is a pearl made of tears, a ruby made of blood, wailing from the wound of one's heart, torn to pieces by the separation from father and mother, wife and children. But such purses never wear out, such treasures never fail. Thieves cannot break into heaven. Woodworms cannot eat what is deposited there. And have heaven in your hearts, and your hearts in heaven, near your treasures. Because a heart, whether good or wicked, is with what you consider your dear treasure. So as a heart is there where its treasure is, in heaven, so the treasure is there where the heart is, within you. Nay, the treasure is within the heart, and with the treasure of saints. In the heart there is the heaven of saints. Be always ready, like those who are about to depart, or are waiting for their master. You are the servants of the Master God. He can call you where He is, any moment, or come where you are. Be therefore always ready to go, or to pay Him homage, with work or traveling belt round your waist, and lamps lit in your hands, coming out of a wedding party with one who has preceded you in heaven, and in being consecrated to God on the earth. God may remember that you are waiting, and may say, Let us go to Stephen, or to John, or to James, and to Peter. And God is fast in His coming, or saying, Come. So be ready to open the door to him when he arrives, or to leave should he call you. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival. I tell you solemnly that to reward them for their faithful waiting, he will gird his waist, make them sit at the table, and serve them. He may come at the first, or second, or third watch, You do not know, so be always vigilant. And you will be happy if you are so, and the master finds you thus. Do not flatter yourselves by saying, There is time, he will not come tonight. Evil would befall you. You do not know. If one knew when a thief is going to come, one would not leave the house unguarded, so that a robber may force the door and coffers. Be prepared as well, because when you least expect him, the Son of Man will come, saying, It is time. Peter, who has even forgotten to finish his food, to listen to the Lord, when he sees that Jesus is silent, asks, What you said, is it for us or for everybody? It is for you, and for everybody, but it is primarily for you, because you are like stewards put by the master at the head of the servants, and it is your duty to be twice as vigilant, both as stewards and as simple believers. What must a steward be like once he has been put by his master at the head of the servants, so that he may give each his fair portion at the right moment? He must be shrewd and loyal, in order to fulfill his own duty and make his subordinates fulfill theirs. Otherwise, the interests of the master would suffer a loss, whereas he pays so that the steward may act on his behalf and safeguard his interests while he is away. Happy is the servant whom the master finds acting loyally, diligently, and honestly on his returning home. I tell you solemnly that he will appoint his steward over other estates, over all his estates, and will relax and rejoice in his heart because of the reliability of his servant. But if the servant says, Well, my master is very far away and has written to me that he will be delayed in coming back home, so I can do what I like, and I will do the necessary when I think he is about to come. And he begins to eat and drink until he gets drunk, and gives crazy orders, and as the good servants under him refuse to carry them out, not to cause damage to their master, he beats servants and maids until they are taken ill and decline. And thinking that he is happy, he says, At last I relish being the master and feared by everybody. But what will happen to him? It will happen that the master will arrive when he least expects him, catching him perhaps in the very act of pocketing money, or bribing some of the most unreliable servants. Then, I tell you, the master will throw him out, depriving him of his position as steward, and refusing to keep him among his servants, because it is not right to keep unfaithful traitors among honest people. And the more the master previously loved and instructed him, the more he will be punished. Because the more one is aware of the will and mind of the master, the more one is obliged to fulfill it accurately. If one does not act as the master explained in so great detail that nobody else was told so clearly, one will be severely beaten, whereas an inferior servant who knows little and does wrong while he thinks he is doing right will receive a less severe punishment. Much will be requested of him who has given much, and he who has much in his care will have to return much, because my stewards will be asked to give an account also of the soul of a baby 1 hour old. My election is not a cool relaxation in a flowery little wood. I came to bring fire on the earth, and what can I wish for but that it may light up? That is why I tire myself, and I want you to tire yourselves, until you die, and until the whole earth is a celestial bonfire. I am to be baptized with a baptism, and how distressed I will be until it is accomplished. Are you not asking why? Because through it I will be able to make you fire-bearers, agitators who will act in every and against every social stratum, to make it one thing only, the flock of Christ. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth, and according to the way of thinking of the earth? No, on the contrary, I came to bring discord and separation, because from now on, and until the whole world becomes only one flock, of 5 people in one house, 2 will be against 3, and the father will be against his son, and the son against the father, the mother against her daughters, and the daughters against the mother. And mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law will have a further reason not to understand each other, because a new language will be spoken by some lips, and it will be like Babel, because a deep disturbance will agitate the reign of human and superhuman affections. Then the time will come when everything will be unified in a new language, spoken by all those who have been saved by the Nazarene, and feelings will be filtered like water, as the dross will sink to the bottom, while the limpid waves of celestial lakes will shine on the surface. Truly, it is not restful to serve me, according to the meaning man attaches to that word. Heroism and indefatigability are required, but I tell you that at the end it will be Jesus, still and always Jesus, who will gird his waist to serve you, and will sit with you at an eternal banquet, and all labor and sorrow will be forgotten. Now, since no one has been looking for us, let us go to the lake. We shall rest at Magdala, in the gardens of Mary of Lazarus. There is room for everybody, and she has put her house at the disposal of the pilgrim and his friends. There is no need for me to tell you that Mary of Magdala died with her sin, and she has risen again from her repentance, as Mary of Lazarus, the woman disciple of Jesus of Nazareth. You are already aware of that, because the news spread like the fury of the wind in a forest. But I will tell you something you do not know. All the personal wealth of Mary is for the servants of God and the poor people of Christ. Let us go.